In the heart of London, during the 19th century, the city experienced one of the most unusual and tragic events in its history. On October 17, 1814, a quiet neighborhood of St. Giles was shattered by an extraordinary flood, not of water, but of beer. This bizarre incident, now known as the London Beer Flood, occurred at the Horse Shoe Brewery, which was located in the densely populated area of Tottenham Court Road. At the time, the Horse Shoe Brewery was one of the largest producers of porter, a dark beer that was extremely popular in London. The brewery was owned by Mew & Company, and it housed several massive vats, each holding thousands of barrels of beer. These vats were made of wood, bound by large iron hoops. One of these vats, standing 22 feet high and containing over 135,000 gallons of beer, was at the center of this tragic event. On that fateful afternoon, a worker at the brewery noticed something alarming, a crack in one of the vat's iron rings. However, this was not an uncommon occurrence, and no one at the time believed it posed an immediate threat. But at around 5:30 p.m., the iron ring suddenly snapped, causing the vat to rupture violently. The force of the rupture was so immense that it caused the surrounding vats to collapse as well, unleashing a tidal wave of beer throughout the brewery and into the streets. Within minutes, over 320,000 gallons of beer cascaded into the streets of St. Giles, flooding the area and causing unimaginable devastation. The flood of beer smashed through walls, destroyed homes, and surged into the surrounding streets. The neighborhood, which was home to many impoverished families living in cramped and dilapidated housing, was suddenly submerged in this tidal wave of alcohol. The force of the flood was so strong that it caused buildings to collapse, trapping residents inside. Many of the victims were swept away by the torrent of beer, and the narrow streets of the neighborhood quickly filled with debris, making it difficult for rescuers to reach those in need. In the chaos that followed, 8 people tragically lost their lives, most of them women and children. Some were drowned in their homes, while others were killed by the collapsing structures. In the aftermath of the flood, the scene was one of utter devastation. The streets were littered with debris, and the smell of beer filled the air for days. While the flood itself was a freak accident, the poor living conditions of the neighborhood contributed to the high death toll. The slums of St. Giles were notoriously overcrowded and unsanitary, and the event highlighted the dangers faced by the city's poorest residents. The story of the London beer flood quickly spread, and the press at the time reported on the tragic incident with a mixture of horror and dark humor. Some newspapers even described how people were seen scooping up the beer from the streets in pots and pans, trying to salvage what they could from the bizarre disaster. Despite the scale of the tragedy, no one was held legally responsible for the flood. Mew & Company was able to avoid any serious repercussions, and the courts deemed the event an act of God, a phrase used to describe incidents beyond human control. The brewery continued to operate after the disaster, and the damaged vat was eventually replaced. The London beer flood remains a unique and unusual chapter in the city's history, a tragic accident that claimed lives and left a lasting impact on the neighborhood. It serves as a reminder of the unpredictable nature of life in the industrial age, where new technologies and practices sometimes carried unexpected dangers. Although the flood occurred over 200 years ago, its memory lingers in London's history, a surreal event where the streets of the city were transformed into rivers of beer, leaving a community to grapple with the aftermath. And while the story of the London beer flood may seem strange or even humorous to some, it is important to remember the human cost of the tragedy, the lives lost and the families forever affected by the disaster. It was an event that reminded the world that even in a city as advanced and bustling as London, disaster can strike in the most unexpected and bizarre ways.